In the previous video of this old Coomber PA system, you saw me upgrade it by adding in a tweeter and replacing the battery so it now works on battery power. In this video, this is the sort of second part, I'm going to add more functionality. So I'm going to give this Bluetooth functionality so I can connect a phone over Bluetooth and stream audio to it. And I'm also going to add an AM/FM radio so I can basically use radio on it. So what we'll do is we'll sort of take a look at the parts that I've bought for it, and then we're going to take it apart and add them in. So now let's take a look at the hardware we're going to use. So first up we have this little Bluetooth adapter. This costs a whole £2.22, and what it is a little, looks like a USB stick, but the USB is only for power, so the idea is you plug it into a USB power source, and then you can connect just a regular 3.5mm jack on the end, talk to this over Bluetooth, and stream audio out the jack. So that's quite a neat little device. So what I'll be doing with this is I'll actually be taking it apart and soldering wires directly onto the power supply and the jack on the back, and then sort of wiring it directly into the Coomber. This was just a very cheap option. You can get pre-made modules that are just a PCB, but this actually worked out cheaper, so yeah, that was fairly cheap. The next bit of hardware we have is this little cheap AM/FM radio. You get lots of little FM radio modules for projects like this, but they're all FM only, and I wanted some level of AM functionality, so I bought this. This cost a whole £6 again from the same seller, so it's incredibly cheap stuff, but actually it's not too bad. So here's the radio. I've already had this apart, so if you see any sort of scratches on it, that was me. That you can see on the back it's a bit mangled, but yeah. So, cheap little portable radio, it's quite nice, just little LCD on the front. Buttons there for the tuner. It's got some level of memory, so you can store station presets and turn it on. There you go, it pops up with a radio station. You can switch to AM there, so you can switch between both bands. And yeah, you can just tune up and down. It'll do auto scans, so if we hold that down, it'll scan and find other stations. It's a pretty nice little device. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with this. Oh, it's scanning, oops. Stop. So yeah, we're going to add this in as well. And again, like with the Bluetooth module, this does have a 5V power supply connection on the top as well as a headphone jack. What I'll be doing is actually taking it apart and wiring directly onto the inside, so I'm not actually using any connectors. And what I'll also be doing is rigging the FM antenna from this up to the antenna built into the Coomber for the radio mic, because this being a portable radio is designed to use your headphone cable as the antenna, whereas actually connecting a proper antenna to it will be a lot better. So let's see what else we get here, just very quickly. Box, that can go away. So you get a little power cable, it's just a barrel jack on the device, and then a USB connection there. I don't know why they don't put a USB connection on the device itself, that just seems silly, but it was cheap, and I'm not going to use this anyway, so that can go. You also get a pair of extremely cheap headphones, which, to be honest, aren't the worst headphones I've ever heard. They're actually bearable, but they're incredibly uncomfortable and they're cheap. They can go away as well. Then you get a manual, very simple, just explains how it works for like channel scanning, saving settings and stuff. And actually, surprisingly, it's in really good English, which is somewhat disappointing. I was hoping this would be really amusing, but no, it's actually pretty decent. So yeah, there's the manual. And that's it. So there we have the radio and the Bluetooth module we're going to use. Obviously there's going to be some extra stuff we're going to have to add in as well, such as this power supply. So these are both 5V devices, both designed to be powered over USB. The Coomber operates at 24V internally, or 12V. It can do anywhere between 24 and 12V. So I bought this cheap voltage regulator from eBay. It was £1. It's probably not great, but it takes up anywhere between like 5 and 30V something in, so it's well within the range, and outputs 5V. And yeah, it was £1. And I suppose being £1, I did have to solder the regulator on myself. I think it was meant to be soldered on, but it sort of fell off when I took it out of the packaging, so I've had to resolder that. But yeah, that's a little voltage regulator. As far as the other hardware goes, as I said, I'm going to connect this up to the FM antenna built into the Coomber, but this also has the AM radio. So I've bought this cheap AM sort of ferrite core antenna. It was like £3. I'm just going to add that because it's currently got a built-in AM antenna. This might just be a little bit better, so I'm going to add that in. That's not really essential at all, but I thought I'd just add it anyway. And then I'm also going to add in this, which is a panel mount 3.5mm jack. I'll be attaching that to the back of the Coomber and just giving it a better line in, because currently it's only got a big DIN plug for line in, so this will be an easier line in for it. And then to switch between all these devices, because I don't have to make some sort of audio mixer or anything to link all these together, given there's only one line input on the Coomber we can connect to, I'm going to use this little rotary switch. So this will let me switch between the radio, the Bluetooth, and the line-in jack, just a 3-position switch. And as you can see, it's 4-pole, so that means I can not only have this switch the audio signals, it can also switch the power. So the power can be switched on for Bluetooth or switched on for the radio and switch between them. That's somewhat important for Bluetooth because this adapter has no level of authentication. You literally connect to it and it will just work. So what I don't want to happen is like have it out in public somewhere, whatever, and anyone can connect to this and suddenly hijack it. So having the ability to switch power on and off to the Bluetooth adapter is going to be quite handy. Then finally, just a little knob that will go on top of the Bluetooth adapter, not the Bluetooth, on top of the rotary switch. So yeah, time to install this. Since I'm going to be using the built-in aerial on the Coomber for my radio that I'm adding, I want to upgrade the cable it's connected with, because currently it's connected with this sort of 2-core figure of 8 cable, which just isn't suitable for radio use at all. And they really shouldn't have probably used that for the radio mic. You can see that the one connection goes to the aerial itself, the other connection goes to the casing via a capacitor for ground. So that's fine, but the cable just isn't suitable. The cable then comes up here and connects onto the radio mic board. So I'm going to replace that with this coax. This is URM70 coax. I picked it because it was quite cheap. It's nice and flexible. It's a lot more flexible than some coax because it's got a stranded core. And the most important thing is it has a copper outer sheathing. That's because I'm going to be soldering the outer sheathing to this capacitor. And lots of the coax has a sort of aluminium usually sheathing, and that just doesn't solder well, so I've used copper there. So what I'll do first is take out this old cable and put the new coax in instead. So first bit we're going to desolder is just desolder the connection from the capacitor. Should be fairly easy to do. There we go. And then do the same for the connection there. Onto the aerial. Maybe a bit harder because of the higher thermal mass of it, but shouldn't be too bad. Come on. That doesn't seem to want to melt, turn temperature up a little bit. I think the sort of sheer amount of metal here is not really helping it. Melt the solder. Let's see. There we go, there we go, that's it gone. Yeah, it was a little bit fiddly. I think it was just a lot of metal there. So that's now disconnected. So now let's do it to the radio mic board. So let's just get these two connections off. So we've got the ground here. There we go, and then also the main connection here. Let's get this right around. Let's get in. There we go, that's now off. So that old connection is now removed. So all we now need to do is get that cable out and put the coax in. Okay, so we just need to get this coax soldered in, so it shouldn't be too bad. Just sort of the centre conductor, and then try and work out to attach the sheathing to the capacitor. Okay, so I've now attached the centre conductor there and the outer sheathing to the capacitor, and it feels fairly solid, so that's fine. So what I'm going to do is put the whole amplifier assembly back in and solder up to the radio mic, and then we can continue adding the new features. Okay, so I've now attached the coax onto the radio mic board, just soldered the inner connection here, the outer sheathing to here, put some tape around it to sort of insulate it, and use a cable tie to hold it in place. And that's fairly secure. So ultimately when I connect the FM aerial, I'll just connect it onto this and then bring it up. So yeah, now we continue with the rest of the stuff. Okay, so for both these devices, the Bluetooth adapter and the radio, I'm going to mount them to the back of the casing because they'll fit quite neatly, so I can put that there, put the Bluetooth one above it, and then just basically screw them on from the back, and that should basically just be completely fixed there, which is fairly neat. However, the one thing I've found is that I want to have them up in this top left corner, largely to cover this damaged area. And the problem is one of this case screws goes through this hole here, which would be covered by the radio. So what I'm going to do is move this case screw hole down somewhere further down here, so that I can mount these on safely without getting in the way. I'll also move these cable hooks, I think the cable goes round down a little bit as well, just to give a little bit more space. So let's do that. So the way the casing mounts is quite simple. There's just a hole through this metal piece here, and then this little sort of metal clip goes over the top, and that provides a screw thread. So I don't really need to do anything fancy to move it, I just need to literally drill another hole and clip this over it. So if we pull this little clip off first, just get a rough idea of what hole it, sort of size hole I need to make. There we go, and just pull that off. That's all it is there, just a little bit of clip. So I've worked out where the new hole needs to be, I've just roughly scratched it in there. So effectively I need to put a hole that size there, clip the clip over, and we should be good to go. Okay, so I think we're ready to go. I've jammed a box in under here to hopefully catch any metal shavings that come out of this, because that might not be easy to clean up. But that sort of area there looks okay. It's fairly close to the edge actually, so we'll go along a little bit. That's probably fine. It's a 4mm hole from what I'm aware from the other one, so let's go. There we go, that's our new hole there. And yeah, the box does a good job, it caught all the metal, so there we go. And all we need to do is put a little clip over it, and we should be able to screw the casing back on through that hole. Fail, I managed to drill the hole in completely the wrong place, so we'll try another one down here. Like, literally managed to make it go completely perfectly between two holes in the back of the casing, so let's try now, try again. Cool. So now let's try this time. Cool, so let's see if this works. It's not perfectly aligned, but it'll do. It looks good enough. So put the screw in. There you go. That's secure. So we can now get ready to mount all the new radio equipment. So the first thing I want to figure out how to mount is the Bluetooth adapter. So I'm going to mount it sort of here, in the top left corner, and that gives me sort of 3 holes here I can put through. So I'm going to actually need to drill all those 3 holes into the back of this, because I'll need 2 to mount the screws to hold it on, and then 1 to feed wires through. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to sort of carefully take the top off, and sort of, I don't know, like line this up underneath, and then I'm going to sort of put basically a mark through onto the back of the Bluetooth dongle, take it apart, put those holes in it, and then hopefully we can just sort of screw it on. Okay, so we have a Bluetooth adapter, and on the back I've marked 3 little dots, not that clear, but yeah, there's 3 little dots there, and that's where I need to drill the holes. But obviously before we drill the holes we need to actually take it apart, so we're not going to like put a hole through the circuit board or something. So it's fairly easy, cap just comes off the end, and then it's just really literally just splits open down the side, like that. Dead easy to get inside. There we go, and the little cap pops off there, and the board comes out. So this is literally all it is, just take a quick look. So USB connector there, audio connector at the back, and it's just a single chip. See the part number off that. Yeah, so that's a little chip there. So it's a little single chip solution that does the whole thing. So that's pretty neat. So all I need to do is drill those 3 holes. Okay, so I've now mounted the casing, so I've put 1 screw at the back here, and then the cap's got another screw in it here, and that leaves 1 free hole that can go through for feeding wires. It'll be a bit tight to feed all the wires through there, but I think I'll be able to do it. If not, worst case I just drill a slightly bigger hole and also extend the size of the hole in the Coomber, and that'll work. So the little mounts I'm using are just these little plastic things, so it's like little plastic screws and nuts. I'm using these just because they can't short out any circuitry or anything, so that's fairly neat. So the one problem though, is because we've got the screw here, the audio jack on the Bluetooth dongle hits it, so it won't actually go in. So I'm just going to desolder that and take it off, because there's no real point having it there. I'm not actually going to use it, I'm just going to solder wires directly onto these pads anyway. So let's take that off, see how it fits. Okay, so I've now removed that connector, came off, it wasn't too hard to get off, and now there's some pads there I can solder wires to directly. But we just check it all fits, we should be able to now slide this in, and gently squeeze it around a little bit so it goes in. So the USB connector will now hold the front bit on, and now in theory we can just put the top case over. Somehow, it's not a bit fiddly, but if I can get this lined up properly, just like the board's not in all the way. There we go. That's now installed. So now that's mounted on the case, and if we drop this down into the Coomber, you can see the little hole in the side gets hidden. So that actually looks quite neat, it just looks like a little box in the back. And then finally, once it's all done, we can put all the wire through that little hole in the bottom and connect it up to the inside. So now we've figured out what we're doing with the Bluetooth adapter, let's attach some wires to it and get them fed through. Okay, so I've now finished modifying the Bluetooth dongle so we can fit it in. So the simplest thing I've just done is attach a couple of power wires. So the white wire is obviously negative, red's positive, and just soldered that directly onto the back of the USB connector. So these can feed into the inside of the Coomber and power it. The slightly trickier thing I've done is for audio. So the audio cable I'm using is a sort of 3mm thick coax, you may as well use sort of decent quality coax stuff, so that's that there. And the outer sheathing of that goes through this yellow wire and up to the ground connection where the audio jack used to be. So the ground's fairly simple. But what you'll see for the actual audio signal is there's two resistors here. That's because the Bluetooth adapter's stereo, same with the radio that I'll be adding as well. They're all stereo devices, whereas the Coomber is entirely mono. So the option I really had was I could just connect up one channel, but then certain audio would maybe not work if it was trying to go between two channels. So I've just added these two little resistors here, which mix the stereo signal down to a single mono signal that then can go down the wire. So that's all those resistors are doing there, and it's all just sort of tacked onto the connectors. And yeah, it's fairly neat. It works pretty well. So you get a close up of that. I mean, it's not beautiful soldering, but it works. So the next thing is to now try and install it into the casing and feed those wires through that hole, which might be a little bit tight, but we'll see how we get on. That was relatively easy. So I've now mounted the Bluetooth dongle in the casing. You can see it's mounted in fairly neatly there. And if we look around the back, you can see all the wires just popped through the hole. I widened the hole out slightly to about 5mm, I think, just so it's got a bit more space, but yeah, all the wire comes through. Ready to connect up to the rotary switch, which I'll add. So yeah, that's fairly neat. And hopefully, in theory, I should just be able to mount the top casing on, so hopefully that'll just fit down like that. There we go. And there you go. Mounted perfectly to the top of the case. That feels pretty secure as well, so I'm very happy with that. So yeah, now to get on with adding the rest of the stuff. So the next thing I want to do is add the power supply, rotary switch, and line-in jack. This means I can wire all this up along with the Bluetooth module, test all that, and then I'll add the radio in later, because that'll require a little bit more fiddling in terms of antennas. So if I get all this in first, we can at least test all this out before we add that in. So what I first need to do is drill a couple of holes in the casing to mount the connector, the 3.5mm jack, and the rotary switch. And then I'll be mounting this just directly to the back of the rear panel, just by putting some screws through the back. So we'll see that in a second. So next thing to do is make the holes for these. So the first hole I'm going to make is here, and that's where I'm going to mount the 3.5mm jack. So I'm going to drill a 6mm hole, which should be big enough to fit that whole connector through. Cool, so there's that hole made. If we clean that off, and we'll see if that connector fits through it. Okay, so I've just tried drilling this hole to fit the 3.5mm jack in, but what the problem is I've just realised that the sort of screw thread on the jack isn't really long enough to fit through the wood, so if I sort of put it in the back, I can get it to poke through, but there's not enough screw thread there to actually be able to put a little nut on to secure it. And I've tried drilling a countersink in the back, and it just doesn't really work. So what I'm going to do instead, I'm actually just going to mount this to the metal casing of the Coomber, so I'll drill a hole through that. I'll then mount the rotary switch just below here so there's enough clearance above it, and then I can just cover this hole up with a label that explains what the rotary switch does, so you won't really see it. So that's a slight pain, but it'll be fine. So I'll leave the 3.5mm jack out for now and put that in later, and I'll just focus on connecting the rotary switch up with the power supply and the Bluetooth module. Okay, so when I'm ready to drill the hole for the rotary switch, which I'm going to do here, it's going to need to be pretty big because it's got to fit this whole screw thread through, and the biggest bit I've got is like 8mm, so it's probably going to need to be a bit fiddly to try and make it wide enough for this, but I'll just put the hole through and then try and fit it, and we'll see how we get on. So I'm just going to do it in this hole here. So I think I'll just need to widen that out a little bit, and then we'll be able to fit the rotary switch. Okay, so I've now mounted the rotary switch, and then I cut the shaft shorter and put the knob on, and it works absolutely fine. You can see there it is in the back. So the plan will be just solder all the wires that are required directly onto this, and that'll sort of, all the wires can just go onto that and it'll work quite neatly. So the next thing I need to do is mount the power supply. So, where is it? There it is. So the power supply's here. The plan is just to mount it round about on the back here. And I've worked out that if you put it on diagonally and line it up to the correct combination of holes, like there, I think, yeah, you can line it up roughly, and then to have two of the screw holes lined up with two holes on the wood. So all I need to do is line it up like that, put two of those plastic bolts through, screw it on, and it'll be absolutely fine. So that'll be the power supply mounted. Okay, so now I mounted the power supply there. It's fairly solid. Just basically put some little bolts through. You can see them on the back there, but I might just colour them in or just leave them. It doesn't really know. It's not really that bad. So what I'll do now is I'll need to wire all this up. It's going to be a bit fiddly to wire it all, so I'm not going to bother doing it on camera, or it'll just take hours. So I'll wire it all up, and then I'll come back once it's all done, and we'll take a look at how it's all, and I'll sort of explain what I'm doing. And with that, it's all wired up now, so I can actually use the Bluetooth adapter. So if we turn, so the Coomber's already switched on. So we turn it up to the right, which I'll put it into Bluetooth mode.
Bluetooth mode.
And yeah, the Bluetooth adapter talks to you, it's quite amusing. And now if I go on my phone and tell it to pair to the adapter.
Paired.
Oh, it did it automatically. And it also announces it. The little lights come on solid saying it's connected. Now if I go on my phone and start some music playing, it'll it'll start coming out the Coomber. So I've got the phone completely wirelessly playing the music, and it's working. Also, if I turn it off, it'll just drop. So yeah, that's pretty cool. So what we'll now do is we'll take it apart and see how I've wired all that up, because it's a little bit fiddly. So we'll now take a look at the simpler bit, which is how this connector is wired. So we've got the connections for the speakers that we've seen before, but we've got two more wires I've added. This is the power, so this goes over to this sort of power supply here and soldered directly onto the back here. So this is carrying the 24 volts up to the regulator board. Then here we have this audio coax. That's soldered directly onto the line input, which is where that DIN connector is. So it's just soldered directly onto the back. Cable goes up into this ATX connector, and that's effectively the audio from the back panel will go down into this board. So what we'll now do is we'll take a look at the back panel, which is a bit more interesting. So we're now taking a look at the back panel. I'm going to try and explain how all this works. It's a little bit fiddly, so I'm probably going to forget how it works myself, but I'll try and explain it all. So all this over here just goes to that switch for the speaker, so basically ignore all these wires that are cable tied in, and it's these ones we're going to be focusing on. So what we have is these two wires coming out the ATX connector here. These are the power that we saw before on the other side, so these are like 24 volts or whatever. The negative of this goes directly into this voltage regulator, and then the positive goes up to the rotary switch. What I then have on the rotary switch is if the rotary switch is in the position for the radio or Bluetooth, it connects the positive voltage supply from the Coomber down into the voltage regulator so it switches on. So that means if it's switched to the radio or Bluetooth, the voltage regulator powers up. If it's switched to the line input, this won't power up. What then happens is the output of this connects, the negative of this connects directly into the Bluetooth module, and the radio will also connect directly into here. The positive output of this, however, also goes to the rotary switch. So when the rotary switch is switched to Bluetooth, the positive power output of this connects to the Bluetooth module, and when it's switched to the radio, the positive output of this connects to the radio. So this means that only the device that's selected is actually going to be powered on to save power. And it also means the Bluetooth adapter isn't sort of constantly sitting in pairing mode when it's not actually being used. Then finally up here with the rotary switch, you can also see these coax connections that are in place. These are carrying the audio, so the audio is also switched. So this cable coming out the middle, that's the sort of common audio, so that cable goes directly down to the ATX connector and goes to the amplifier. This cable here comes out the Bluetooth module, and this comes in and is switched here. So when it's switched set to Bluetooth, this is connected to here. When it's set to radio, which isn't added yet, the radio's audio signal will be connected to this wire. So only one audio signal is connected to the amplifier at any one time. So that's probably a very bad explanation of how it all works, but hopefully that makes sense. So the next thing we're going to do is add that line input, and I'll mount it onto the actual Coomber's metal casing because we had the problem earlier, but I'll then wire it up through here and it will also go into the rotary switch. So we'll go and do that now. Okay, so I've now added the line input here and it works. You also might notice that this switch, the speaker config's been moved down. That's because I didn't quite think when I mounted this. I went to put this back on and discovered the switch was hitting the jack. So I just moved it down one notch and then used the sticker to cover up the old hole. So that's neat enough. Should have probably thought about that before I did it. But anyway, now if we plug a phone into the line input, in there, starts music going on the phone. There. That's it playing. So yeah, we now have a line input. And if I use the knob, I can then switch it to the Bluetooth mode.
Bluetooth mode.
So now it's Bluetooth and I switch it back again. Goes to the line. So this lets me switch to all the inputs. So yeah, that's working. We'll now take a look at how that's wired up. So the way this is wired up is really simple. We just have this extra wire coming in here that goes down into the rotary switch, and like the Bluetooth module, when it's switched to the correct position, the signals coming down this wire go down this wire back to the amplifier. So yeah, nothing really fancy up here. Then really the only other interesting thing here is the other end of this wire, which goes off to the other half of that big connector, is that I've had, like with the Bluetooth module, I've added a couple of resistors here to down mix the stereo signal to a mono one, and then the outer sheathing just connects on here, so that just gives you a single mono connection that can go up with the switch. So yeah, the line-in connection is really nothing very fancy at all. Okay, so we're finally now able to add the radio, which is going to be the last component. So what we're going to need to do is take this apart to solder on the audio output connections, the power input, as well as connecting those external aerials to it. So let's take this apart. So when I first tried to take this apart, it was an absolute nightmare because I couldn't find how to do it. There's these two screws on the bottom, and I couldn't see any other screws. I thought it was clipped together, and it turned out it wasn't. So I'll show you how they've done that. But the first thing we'll do is take these two screws out the bottom. Like, actually, after taking this apart once and figuring out how it's done, it's actually a pretty nice little thing just for being fairly easy to work on. So both those screws come out, and then the trick is where they've hidden the other screws, which is actually under the screen plastic. So you have to peel this sort of label off the screen to try and do it carefully so I don't damage it, because I kind of want to keep using that. Oh, like that. It's fine, thankfully there was a screen protector on it. So I didn't actually scratch the screen there. That was close. So I was going to try and rush things to do them on camera. Let's see. Carefully get under here. There we go. That's coming off, and then just peel this just little sticker off the front. It's nothing really complicated, but once you get that off, there's 4 screws, and that's the problem. Before I couldn't see those screws, so I spent ages trying to like force it open, and I was like, do I have to like Dremel it open or something? But nope, it actually was just some hidden screws. But I've got these screws, take these out, and it should just pop right open. For £6, I'm actually really impressed with this little radio. It's actually pretty good. Like, even the sound quality is fairly decent. So I'm gonna get this one. This little screws me a bit stuck. There we go. Cool. That's all the screws out. Put them over there safe, and then it pops open. So what happens? The front just pops off. That leaves the back casing, which I'll have to drill holes in eventually. Get rid of that, and here's the inside of the radio. So we'll take a quick look at it because it's quite a simple little device. Okay, so here's the inside of that little radio. So we can see the sort of main components. So here we've got the battery, which is a little 3.7 volt lithium thing. I'm going to take this out just because it's never going to really want to run on battery. It's going to be powered directly from the Coomber. And I mean, there's a risk of exploding, I suppose, but there's no point having it in there. Worst case not having this, it might lose memory, so it might like lose presets for stations, but I just rather not have it in there, rather just have it directly powered off the Coomber. Then down here we can see that little AM sort of loop stick antenna. This is what I'm going to be replacing with a much larger one I've bought, just for slightly better reception. But it actually doesn't work badly, that thing works okay. And that little loop stick antenna just connects to those 2 little pins there. What we also have is a single chip here. This is the main radio chip, which is not focusing. So the model number of this I've forgotten. It's KT0913. And looking this up, it's an all-digital tuner. So it's like a little chip. You connect the antennas to it, and obviously an audio output to it, and then you talk to it over a digital sort of serial protocol. I think I2C it does as well. And so you talk to it over that, and that lets you set the stations that you're tuning to. So that's how it works. And obviously there's a little microcontroller on here, which is probably this unlabeled chip here. That provides the whole user interface, and it just sends digital signals to this chip, and it tunes correctly. So it's actually a nice little setup. Up here we then have the headphone jack and the power jack, so I'll be soldering directly onto these to get the signals out of them. And then the one thing I did actually break when I took this apart, but it's fine, is this is designed to use your headphone antenna as your headphone cable as an antenna. So you can see they've got this trace that comes down from the ground on the audio jack. It goes through this capacitor here, which connects it to the audio ground. But then it also continues down this side here to this sort of area here that looks a bit mangled. That's because that's a bit mangled. So what I used to have here was a little capacitor across this, little surface mount capacitor, and that would couple the headphone ground to the FM input on the tuner. So that's how it worked. So what I've done is I took the capacitor off, which now means that using the headphones no longer act as the antenna, which is good, because what now happens then, I'm going to solder a wire directly onto this pad here, and that'll connect the antenna directly to the tuner rather than going through the headphone cable. So that's just my little idea there. So what I'm going to do, take this battery off, solder an antenna onto here, solder another antenna onto here, solder the appropriate audio and power connections up here, and then I'll have to drill holes in the back case and mount this on the Coomber and feed the wires through. So yeah, I think the next thing would actually be probably to work out how to mount this back panel, because that's going to be a little tricky. And once that's done, I can do all the wiring. Okay, so I've now mounted it. So, well, not mounted it yet, but figured out how. So I've basically just drilled a bunch of holes in the back of this, like that, and they line up reasonably well with holes in the Coomber, so I just need to do that, drop a couple of sort of plastic screws through. That's enough to hold it in, and then the other holes can all be used for feeding wires through. So next thing is going to be actually put the wires onto the radio and then start feeding them through. So for the first step, let's just remove this battery. It's not too hard to do. So terminal there, terminal there. There we go. They're both disconnected, and then now just carefully try and remove the battery from the PCB. It's sort of glued on. It's not too hard though. There we go. That's easy to get off, and that's our little. Oh, solder's stuck again. Just get that off properly. There we go. That's the little battery. So that was fairly easy. Handy little battery to keep. Don't know what sort of capacity it is, but yeah, little battery there. So next thing I need to do is just disconnect these two AM antenna connections. They're again relatively easy. I'm going to leave the original antenna in the case. I'm just not going to have it connected. And I'll connect my proper one, which is significantly bigger, so should hopefully get better reception. I looked into connecting the main whip antenna up, but it just wasn't going to work. It was just going to be, there was so much interference from various circuits, it just wasn't working right. So using the separate loop rod thing will be fine. So that's now there. I'll just tuck these wires away neatly later. So the next thing I need to do is work out how we're going to solder all these new wires on. So just try and save time, I think I'll just solder all the wires on myself off camera, then I'll come back and show what I've done, because otherwise if I'm trying to explain it the whole time, I'm A, going to do it all wrong, and B, it's just going to take hours. So yeah, be back in a bit. Okay, so I've now finished off wiring up the radio. So what I've done is obviously I've taken the battery out, and then removed the two jacks at the top, both for power and for audio, and you can sort of see I've wired extra wires on in place. So the red and white wires just do the power, positive and negative, and that's got a bit of tape over it just to protect it from shorting out to the audio line. And like I've done in both situations before, I've used a pair of resistors to mix the stereo signal down to mono, and I connected that through this white coax that goes off to that'll go off to the amplifier. What I've then also done is I've soldered this wire across, this bit of other white coax, across the FM connection, so that'll be used for the FM aerial, so that'll go down into the machine and connect up to the main aerial. What I also had to do is I broke the solder trace here, because this is the connection from the headphone ground that goes round for using the headphone cables and antenna. Removing the capacitor did stop that being connected to the radio chip, but instead what I did is I break the trace, so it meant I was able to use all three solder pads here to attach this wire, so it's a bit more secure. So I just cut through that and that's now fine. So yeah, next thing to do is figure out how to mount it in the back of the machine. Oh yeah, also what I'll do is I'll solder the AM ferrite core antenna across here. However, I'm not going to be able to do that yet because I've already mounted it in the back of the machine, so I'll only be able to actually wire that up when it's actually mounted because it's quite short wires. So they'll just get tapped across there when we actually go and assemble it. So yeah, next thing to do is actually get this assembled and put into the case. Okay, so I've now reassembled the radio. I ultimately ended up just connecting these two wires on for the AM antenna, which I'll then poke through and solder the actual antenna onto it, because the wires were so short there was no way I could feed it in and solder it into this. And I've put all the screws in, and then what I've done is on the back I've put these three plastic bolts through. So what I'll then do is I'll sort of slot this through the back of the machine and then put the nuts over this, and that'll hold it on, and then slot all the wires through as well, because all these holes line up. So yeah, time to get that mounted, and then yeah, fasten it on and connect all the wires up. So here we can now see that the radio is now wired up. So we have these two cables here that are power connected up through the rotary switch, so it switches on and off when it needs to. This cable is the audio output, again going to the rotary switch. Here's a bit of audio coax I'm using to carry the FM antenna signal, that goes down to the main connection down here. And then finally we have these two wires here which are just soldered onto the wires coming from the ferrite rod antenna for the AM radio, which is just zip tied in. So yeah, that now all wires up to this connector, ready to go into the connector to the other side. So let's take a look at that. So now here we can see the connector at the other end, where we have the coax, this black coax here, goes down onto the radio mic board and connects the connection from the main antenna, so that's how it connects the antenna, and that then goes back into this ATX connector here, so all the connections go here. In hindsight I should have probably used thinner coax, this was a complete pain to crimp, but it works. And yeah, it's all zip tied to sort of make one fairly neat just bundle that can all be plugged in. So the next step I suppose is to put the back on, connect this connector, and see it running. Okay, so that's the mod's now complete. So you can see on the back of the machine we've got all the stuff installed. So over here is the switch we had before, to switch the speakers between one way and two way. That was already there, although it has moved slightly. And over here we can see we have the Bluetooth adapter, the radio, and this knob which switches between tuner, line in, and Bluetooth. So what we'll do is we'll quickly go through and just take a look at each of these features and just see them working really. So the line in is fairly self-explanatory. There's a little 3.5mm jack on the side. You can plug the phone into it and start music going. Not really much more to expect than that really. It does what it's meant to do. And it's definitely more convenient now to use that old DIN plug. You can just get cables for that really easily, so that's good. So yeah, that's lightning working. So the next feature we're going to look at is Bluetooth. So we turn the little knob here to turn it on.
Bluetooth mode.
And it talks to you. And it'll now start appear on my phone. So we can see here,
Paired.
so it's already paired, and there it's showing up there as the YET-M1. So that's the device there. So that's now paired to the phone, and as you can see the light on it's now come on solid. And now if I tell the phone to start playing some music, it starts working. And sound quality wise is absolutely fine, like it sounds great. I was a bit concerned being such a cheap adapter, being £2, I thought that, it might have really weird compression artifacts in the audio, but no, it sounds great. So yeah, Bluetooth works really well. And if we disconnect the phone,
Pairing.
it'll tell you it's pairing. It really likes talking to you, this little thing. So the final bit of hardware we want to look at here is the radio, which was definitely the most fiddly bit to install. So we turn it up here to tuner, and it'll now power up, and then we have to press the power button there to switch it on. And you can see there's not really any reception right now, but if I pull the antenna up, and there's the radio. Now also has to be careful because we're going to be copyrighted music here, so we might have to talk over things and skip through it. But if they're just sort of talking, it should be okay. So yeah, there's some FM radio. We've got some presets set, so we can skip up them.
Cycle space. At least as much space as you. We'd like to offer this assurance to anyone worried by the deadline on PPI claims. For me and you.
In Detroit.
Sunset Strip, and more recently the big fat Greek wedding. I've never had.
So yeah, it works pretty well. And of course we can use the channel scan, so if we hold the up button, it'll start scanning through stations and stop when it finds one. Or when it finds a really weak one. And there we go, it works. And of course adjusting the antenna does actually make quite a big difference to the signal level on different stations. So yeah, the FM radio works. So let's take a look at AM. So we press the button here to switch to AM. And that's now doing AM radio. And of course you can do a channel scan here or anything, but if you just hold that button down, it'll scan down to the next station. There's also a lot of very weak AM stations, so they don't all come up, so try and find one that's audible. Down here somewhere. Yeah, there you go, that's working. And of course to adjust the antenna for the AM radio, it doesn't use a big whip. So to adjust the AM antenna, you have to actually turn the whole unit. And it does make a noticeable difference to the sort of signal quality, depending on what angle it's at. But yeah, it works. And the audio quality is actually pretty decent, even for AM.
You're listening to Absolute Radio. Absolute Radio.
So yeah, it's pretty good. And I've also noticed that even though the chip's data sheet says that it only maintains settings when it's in standby mode, I've noticed even if I leave the power completely off with the battery removed for quite a period of time, it still seems to keep settings, which is quite nice. So yeah, I'm very impressed with the little radio as well. It seems to be a pretty decent little bit of kit. Yeah, of course I can't really play much because of YouTube's copyright thingy, but definitely works. Of course we just turn it off. And yeah, all the functionality I needed works. So there you have it. That's the end of this sort of 3-part mini-series where we've taken a look at this Coomber PA system and added some modifications to it. So as you can hear, we now have AM radio, FM radio, line in, and finally, we have Bluetooth.
Bluetooth mode.
So yeah, that was definitely quite a fun project to do. It was a lot more a lot just different from the sort of normal computer stuff I do, doing something a bit more electronics and hardware based. So yeah, it was very good fun. So as always, thank you very much for watching, and stand by maybe for a future video of this where I add some other ridiculous feature I'll think of down the line. So yeah, thanks for watching.